Morning glory and evening grace, America. Hugh Hewitt in Studio West. Special treat from Israel. I'm joined by Taaov. Gadi is a journalist of long standing in Israel. He's a friend of our friend, Bethany Mandel, who pointed out to me his long-form interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu, which is very rare to see. Luckily, the Hebrew had subtitles, so I was able to read along. Taaov, welcome to the program. Would you start off by telling the audience your background in journalism in Israel?
Hello, you. Yes, it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm actually trained as a historian of the United States, actually. My PhD is from Rutgers University. And I started by writing fiction and nonfiction. And then politics sort of pulled me in, and things are so tumultuous in this country that it's hard to raise your head above the everyday occurrences. So I find myself doing a lot of journalism and a lot of long-form interviews.
Well, I have two divides into which our 11 minutes can go. First, the interview with the Prime Minister. It revealed to me what I had long suspected. The divide between Joe Biden increased as his infirmity and cognitive difficulties increased, and his team really separated. And the Prime Minister confirmed that to you. Is that a fair statement for the American audience to hear?
Absolutely. I think the Prime Minister was extremely frustrated with the behavior of the Biden administration, both personally and, of course, above all, nationally, because there was an inevitable clash that's been brewing for a while between the Obama doctrine of the Middle East and Netanyahu's view of what Israel should focus on, which is Iran. And the Biden administration, being a continuation or a third term for Obama, tried to appease Iran and create what they call regional integration. When you ask yourself, what is there to integrate? Apparently, you are supposed to integrate a neo-Nazi genocidal regime which is striving to get a nuclear weapon. Israel cannot afford that, and all of Netanyahu's energies were concentrated on this for maybe 2 decades. That was his first priority. So he couldn't reach an ideological agreement. And as a Prime Minister of Israel, he had to maneuver under very uncomfortable superpower machinations in the Middle East, but he managed to do something incredible, in my opinion. Despite American resistance, despite a almost full weapons embargo during most of this war, he managed to make a sweeping movement from beginning in Gaza and then taking the war over and against Biden's resistance into Lebanon by doing things like the beeper operation, and then taking down Nasrallah, who has American blood to his elbows on his hands. And therefore, he managed to roll this war and get it all the way to the outskirts of Tehran. And in the end, after he left Biden's strategy of the Middle East, or his team's strategy, or Blinken's strategy, or Obama's strategy in shambles, then Biden took credit for curtailing Iran's power. But it was done against American resistance.
Well, the easiest to remember moment of idiocy on the American side is when Vice President Harris said she'd studied the maps of Rafah and Israel can't operate in there. Yeah. And that simply was the peak pressure moment, and Israel didn't bend. This week I had on Douglas Murray, who's written this fascinating new book on democracies and death cults. Douglas, like me, Gentiles. We love Israel because it's our strategic ally of his country, the United Kingdom, my country, the United States, and they are with us in everything. Did the average Israeli feel betrayal by the United States in the course of its traumatic 18-month war, which is still ongoing?
It's a very complicated question, because the press here is like the American press. It's completely biased and left-wing, and it was supportive of the Biden administration's attitude, which undermined Netanyahu. Because what the left here wanted was they actually cheered, as strange as it may sound to American ear, they were actually rooting for Kamala Harris to win against Trump, because in their view, they've lost the hope of convincing the Israeli public to return to the two-state solution track. And what they still hope to achieve is completely dependent on America forcing our hand. So they hoped that there would be a woke, progressive American administration which would force Israel to make concessions to the Palestinians. Most Israelis, especially after October 7th, think that that is suicidal. So the press loved Biden, but Israelis gradually understood that he's not exactly our friend. I must tell you, I'm a pundit on Channel 14 often, and I have my own conservative podcast. And from the minute Biden landed here, I said, don't be fooled by this rhetoric. This is not our friend. And when he said don't, he also meant Israel. Don't invade Lebanon. And we had to invade Lebanon. And,
Very perceptive guy. Have you come to the conclusion that the Democratic Party has shifted inalterably into an anti-Israel stance? Because President Obama was probably the most anti-Israel president we've had since 1948, founding of the state. President Trump is at least the equal of Nixon during the Yom Kippur War and may prove to be even greater than Richard Nixon was during the Yom Kippur War. And I don't think there's any daylight left, but I think the Democratic Party has made a shift. Do you perceive that from your position?
Absolutely. And as I said, I'm a student of American history. And as far as I can see, Obama was the first disciple of Edward Said to occupy the White House. He was sort of a pro-third world president, more than he was pro-Western, even more than he was pro-American. And this was extremely dangerous for Israel. This administration was also very sophisticated. So it sold to the American public a nuclear deal that would actually give the Iranians the bomb. They sold it as a form of containment. And we were unable to get the message through, although, as you know, Netanyahu tried when he defied Obama and spoke to the joint session of the two houses of Congress. But what is happening to the Democratic Party is terrible. They support anti-American and anti-Israeli things. And lo and behold, the anti-American and the anti-Israel often go together, which is why the way I see it, this party would have to, I hope, completely reassess its own course. And I hope that it would come back to American values and so also to the friendship with Israel. I'm also worried about what is happening on the margins of MAGA with people like Tucker Carlson and other isolationists beginning to hint that Israel is the source of trouble rather than the loyal, dependable ally. But the mainstream of the GOP and certainly the Trump administration is pro-Israel and understands us, I think, deeply.
The real problem is Candace Owens and the return of anti-Semitism to a public stage without vast condemnation. Tucker and those who are very suspicious of foreign entanglements are burned by the last 20 years of the long war, but they can't ignore the problem of Iran having a nuclear weapon. Maybe they can. I don't want to speak for anyone. I can't. And I'm hoping Trump acts. Are you an optimist that after the 60-day, quote, negotiation, that bombs will drop as the president has threatened? Because I don't believe Iran will negotiate and open up their nuclear site. They just won't. I don't believe it.
You know, I asked this question the prime minister. In this interview, he laid out the whole course of the war, and you could see how he thinks about it. And I also ventured into the future and asked the prime minister, if Trump brings an agreement in which all the centrifuges, correct my English if my pronunciation is wrong, are dismantled, would that be enough for Israel? Would you, the prime minister, be satisfied? And he had this bemused look on his face, and he only said this. He said, do you trust the Iranians? And that was all he would comment. So I'm guessing he's not happy with anything less than a military takeout. And I have to tell you personally, I think Trump is very serious about dismantling Iran's nuclear program. And once he sees that negotiations would not do it, I think he would do the right thing.
So, Gadi, I want to ask you one thing as an American I'm confounded by. Israel does not have a written constitution. We do. I teach constitutional law and have for 27 years. I do not understand how the Israeli Supreme Court can interfere with the firing of the Shin Bet parallel to MI5-6 merged or the FBI with a little bit of CIA thrown in. It's kind of hard to find a parallel. how they can intervene in that, and how your attorney general can be so rogue. She's just obviously anti-Netanyahu. Now, I don't get involved in other countries' politics, but I see what's red and what's blue. She's anti-Netanyahu, period.
Absolutely, and she has grown to be the most centralized power in the Israeli state, and indeed in any democracy. The late Shlomo Avineri, probably our greatest political scientist in recent decades, once asked in a newspaper op-ed, who is the strongest functionary in the whole of the democratic world? Is that the President of the United States? Is that the Prime Minister of England? No, he said it's the Israeli Attorney General, because the way they have incrementally amassed a power that was not given to them by any law, the combination of the Supreme Court and the Attorney General, who is also the legal counsel to the executive, has become, she can override any decision of the executive. And the way they did it, it's hard to explain the whole process. But think only about this: she's the Attorney General. She holds the last word on prosecution in Israel, and she's also the legal counsel to the executive. So now ask yourself, what happens if anyone in the executives defies her? And then, as luck would have it, traditionally, such people suddenly find themselves under criminal investigation. So it was a trap laid out with patience, and now it's very hard to get out of. But I don't think we have any other option except to break this juristocratic hold of over our government.
I like that phrase, juristocratic hold. I'm going to borrow that. I'm going to steal that, Gadi. I want people to go and follow you on Twitter at GADITAUB1, and I will post a link to the interview with Prime Minister Netanyahu, which does have great English subtitles, and I appreciate your time. I hope you will come back in the future.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on your show.
It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you.